Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the human diplomatic vessel Resilience, watching the massive planet of SciFiPrime grow larger on the main screen. The planet was beautiful, with its purple oceans and golden cities that stretched across entire continents. But Jake felt no wonder as he looked at it today. After 200 years of human membership in the Galactic Empire, this would be the last time any human ship would visit the capital world dot behind him. Dr. Lisa Carter finished reviewing her datapad one final time. She had spent months preparing the evidence that would support humanity's decision to leave the Empire. The numbers were clear and devastating. In the past century, humans had solved 47 major galactic crises, prevented 12 wars, developed cures for 31 diseases that affected multiple alien species, and created technological advances that improved life for billions across the galaxy. Yet in the Council records, humans received credit for exactly none of these achievements. The communications officer turned to Jake. "Admiral, we are receiving clearance to dock at Central Station. The Council is ready for your address." Jake nodded and adjusted his formal uniform. Today would change everything, not just for humanity, but for the entire galaxy. Though the aliens did not know it yet, Central Station orbited SciFiPrime like a small moon. It was a marvel of engineering that housed representatives from over 300 species. As the Resilience docked, Jake could see the various alien ships that filled the massive bays. The sleek silver vessels of the Zentarians, the crystal formations that served as Zephyrian ships, and the dark metal hulks favored by the Vorthic Collective. Each species had their own section, their own privileges, their own voice in galactic affairs. All except humanity. Jake and Lisa walked through the station's corridors toward the main assembly hall. The hallways were filled with aliens of every description. Some walked on legs, others floated through the air, and a few rolled along on mechanical wheels. They all stared at the two humans as they passed. Jake could hear the whispers and clicking sounds that served as conversation among the various species. Most seemed amused that humans had requested time before the full council. They thought it was another plea for better treatment or expanded territory rights. The assembly hall was enormous, with seating for thousands of delegates arranged in a perfect sphere around a central speaking platform. As Jake and Lisa entered, the noise level dropped noticeably. Every eye, sensor, and optical organ focused on them. Jake had spoken here many times before, usually to request aid for some galactic crisis, or to offer human assistance for problems the other species could not solve. Today would be different. Supreme Chancellor Vexthari of the Andorian Collective called the session to order. Her voice carried clearly through the translation systems that allowed all species to understand each other. The Council recognizes Admiral Morrison of the human territories. You may proceed with your address. Jake walked to the center platform and looked around at the assembled representatives. These beings controlled the fate of trillions of lives across the galaxy. They made decisions about trade, territory, military actions, and diplomatic relations. For 2 centuries, they had made these decisions without any meaningful input from humanity. "Honored delegates," Jake began, his voice steady and clear. "I come before you today not to ask for anything, but to inform you of a decision that humanity has made. After careful consideration and extensive debate among our people, we have chosen to withdraw from the Galactic Empire, effective immediately." Reaction was instant and loud. Delegates began talking, clicking, whistling, and making whatever sounds indicated surprise or amusement in their species. Chancellor Vexthari called for order, but it took several minutes for the noise to die. Ambassador Crix of the Vorthic Collective was the first to respond officially. His species looked like giant insects with metal implants covering most of their bodies. "Admiral Morrison, surely you jest. Humanity cannot survive outside the Empire. You lack the resources, the technology, and the military strength to maintain your colonies without our protection and support. Jake had expected this response. Ambassador Crix, humanity appreciates the Empire's past assistance, but we no longer require your protection. We have developed our own capabilities over the past 2 centuries. The Zephyrian representative, a being made entirely of living crystal that communicated through musical tones, chimed in with what the translators rendered as laughter. The young species thinks it can stand alone. How amusing. You will return within 10 years, begging for readmission. Lisa stepped forward and activated a holographic display that showed detailed statistics. Perhaps the Council would like to review exactly what humanity brings to the Empire, she said calmly. The display showed military records, scientific achievements, medical breakthroughs, and technological innovations. Every major advancement in the past century had human involvement, usually as the primary contributor. These records show that human scientists developed the quantum drive systems that allow faster-than-light travel for 70% of Empire vessels. Lisa continued. Human engineers designed and built the terraforming systems that have created habitable worlds for 43 different species. Human medical researchers have prevented or cured diseases that would have killed billions of Empire citizens. The hall grew quieter as delegates reviewed the data. Some began consulting with their advisors through private communication channels. Jake resumed speaking. For 200 years, humanity has served the Empire faithfully. We have fought in your wars, solved your problems, and asked for little in return. But we have been treated as a junior species despite our contributions. We are denied voting rights on major issues. Our expansion is limited to territory that other species do not want. When crises arise, we are expected to provide solutions. But when credit is given, our names are forgotten. Chancellor Vexthari leaned forward in her seat. Admiral Morrison, if humanity has concerns about its status within the Empire, those issues can be negotiated. There is no need for such drastic action. Negotiated? Jake's voice carried a note of irony. We have been negotiating for decades. 3 months ago, this council voted to restrict human expansion to just 12 star systems, citing our aggressive tendencies. This despite the fact that humans have the cleanest record of any species for peaceful colonization and diplomatic conflict resolution. The Thagonian delegate, a being that resembled a walking tree with multiple arms, spoke up. The restriction was necessary. Humans reproduce too quickly and expand too aggressively. Other species need room to grow as well. Lisa activated another display. Actually, human population growth has been slower than average for Empire species over the past 50 years. Our expansion has been limited to uninhabited systems or worlds that other species declared unsuitable for colonization. We have never displaced another species or claimed territory that was already occupied. Jake could see that some delegates were beginning to look uncomfortable as the evidence mounted. They had based their decisions about humanity on assumptions and prejudices rather than facts. The final decision came last week, Jake continued, when the Emergency Council voted to conscript human military forces for the Outer Rim conflict without consulting our representatives. Our people would be sent to fight and die in a war they had no voice in starting, for reasons they were not allowed to question. He paused and looked around the hall one more time. We came to the stars seeking partnership among equals. Instead, we found a system that values us only for what we can provide, while denying us the basic rights given to every other member species. Today, we choose freedom over servitude. The hall erupted again, but this time the tone was different. Where before there had been amusement, now there was concern. Some delegates were already sending urgent messages to their home governments. Ambassador Crix stood up, his metal implants gleaming under the chamber lights. You will regret this decision, Morrison. Humanity will come crawling back within a decade, and when you do, the terms of readmission will be far less generous than your current status. Jake smiled for the first time since entering the chamber. Ambassador, we appreciate your concern, but humanity's future lies elsewhere. We wish the Empire success in all its endeavors. As Jake and Lisa left the platform, Chancellor Vex Thari called out, Admiral Morrison, I hope you understand the implications of this decision. The Empire will not be able to provide assistance if your colonies face difficulties. Jake stopped and turned back one final time. Chancellor, with respect, we have been providing assistance, not receiving it. But you will discover that soon enough. As they walked back through the station corridors toward their ship, Lisa noticed that the alien stares had changed. Where? Before there had been casual indifference or mild amusement. Now there was something that looked very much like worry. Captain Ryan Brooks stood on the command deck of the massive colony ship New Horizon, watching as the last transport shuttles docked with his vessel. 6 months had passed since Admiral Morrison's declaration at the Galactic Council, and the human exodus was proceeding exactly as planned. Ryan had commanded evacuation operations before, but nothing on this scale. Over 3 million humans were leaving Empire space aboard his ship alone, and hundreds of similar vessels were carrying out the same mission across dozens of star systems. The New Horizon was one of humanity's greatest engineering achievements, though the Empire had never recognized it as such. The ship was over 20 kilometers long and could sustain a population of 5 million people for decades while they searched for new worlds to colonize. Ryan had spent the past week overseeing the loading of equipment, supplies, and the countless personal belongings that families refused to leave behind. Every human was leaving willingly, even eagerly, despite the uncertainty that awaited them beyond Empire borders. Dr. Amanda Foster, the ship's chief science officer, approached Ryan with her final report. Captain, we have completed loading all research materials and equipment from the Kepler station. The engineering teams have also finished their work there. Ryan nodded. The Kepler research station had been humanity's crown jewel, responsible for breakthrough discoveries that had advanced Empire technology by centuries. Now it was being systematically dismantled. Commander Beth Williams was overseeing the Kepler evacuation from the station itself. She watched as the final pieces of equipment were carefully removed and loaded onto transport ships. The aliens had expected humans to abandon their facilities and leave everything behind for the Empire to claim. Instead, they discovered that every human-built structure, every piece of advanced technology, and every research database was being methodically taken apart and removed. The automated systems that Beth had programmed were already beginning their work. As soon as the last human left the station, the systems would begin dismantling everything that remained, not destructively, but thoroughly. Every component that humans had added to the original Empire-provided framework would be carefully removed and recycled. The aliens would be left with only the basic shell they had originally contributed. None of the advanced modifications that had made Kepler Station the most productive research facility in the galaxy. On the planet Tharos 4, engineer Paul Henderson was leading a similar operation on a much larger scale. The industrial world had been powered by human-designed fusion reactors for over 40 years. The local Thagonian population had grown dependent on the reliable energy these systems provided. Now Paul was working around the clock to safely shut down the reactors and prepare them for transport to human colony ships. The Thargonians watched nervously as section after section of their planet's power grid went dark. They had never learned to maintain the human technology themselves, assuming that humans would always be available to handle such matters. Governor Vexcall approached Paul as he supervised the removal of the final reactor core. Engineer Henderson, surely you can leave some of these systems operational, the tree-like alien pleaded. My people will face great hardship without adequate power generation. Paul looked up from his work his face showing no emotion. "Governor, these reactors are human property, built with human resources and maintained by human expertise. We offered to train your people in their operation many times over the years, but you always declined, saying it was unnecessary since humans would handle everything." Paul gestured to the massive reactor components being loaded onto transport vessels. "The Empire can certainly build its own power systems to replace these. The technology is not particularly complex for a civilization as advanced as yours claims to be." The governor's leaves rustled with distress, but Paul had already turned back to his work. Similar scenes were playing out across dozens of worlds. On the agricultural planet of Series 3, human hydroponic systems that had fed billions of Empire citizens were being dismantled and shipped out. The alien colonists had never bothered to learn how the systems worked, content to simply enjoy the abundant food they produced. Now they faced the prospect of returning to their traditional farming methods, which were far less efficient and productive. The Empire's communication networks were already showing signs of strain. The quantum relay stations that enabled instant communication across the galaxy had been designed and maintained exclusively by human technicians. As these technicians departed for the colony ships, the relay stations began experiencing cascading failures. Messages that once traveled across the galaxy in minutes now took hours or days to reach their destinations. Captain Steve Martinez commanded the human exploration vessel Pioneer, now operating near the edge of Empire space. His ship was equipped with the most advanced scanning and communication equipment humanity had ever developed, technology that was generations ahead of anything the Empire possessed. Steve's mission was to scout potential colony sites in the unexplored regions beyond the galactic rim. But he also monitored Empire communications to track the effects of humanity's departure. The reports coming through the failing communication networks painted a picture of growing chaos. On the manufacturing world of Rigel 7, automated production lines had shut down when their human-programmed control systems stopped receiving maintenance updates. The alien workers had no idea how to restart the systems manually. Trillions of credits worth of goods that had been scheduled for delivery across the Empire would never be produced. Trade routes that had functioned smoothly for centuries were dissolving into confusion. The navigation systems used by Empire Merchant vessels relied on corrections and updates provided by human-operated monitoring stations. Without these updates, ships found themselves lost in space as stellar drift and gravitational anomalies threw their courses off by thousands of kilometers. Supreme Chancellor Vex Thari convened an emergency session of the Inner Council to address the growing crisis. The assembled leaders of the major Empire species looked increasingly worried as reports flooded in from across their territory. What they had assumed would be a minor inconvenience was rapidly becoming a major disaster. How could we not have known about humanity's role in maintaining our infrastructure? Demanded General Cremus of the Hegemony Forces. The military leader's insectoid features showed clear agitation. Our intelligence services assured us that humans were merely junior partners in these operations. Chancellor Vex Thari consulted her data displays, showing system failures across dozens of star systems. It appears that humans were far more integral to our operations than anyone realized. They seem to have been involved in the design, construction, or maintenance of nearly every major technological system in the Empire. The Zephyrian representative chimed its concern through the translation system. Our worlds are experiencing power failures, communication breakdowns, and transportation disruptions. The crystal formations that house our consciousness require precise environmental controls that were apparently maintained by human technicians. Ambassador Crix of the Vorthic Collective added his species' growing list of problems. Our cybernetic implant manufacturing facilities have ceased operation. The medical systems that maintain our machine biological integration were apparently designed by human doctors working with our own physicians. Without their expertise, we cannot produce replacement components. The scope of the crisis was becoming clear to the council members. Humans had not simply been participants in Empire civilization, they had been its hidden foundation. Their expertise in engineering, medicine, communications, transportation, and dozens of other fields had kept the complex machinery of galactic society running smoothly. Now that foundation was being systematically removed. Chancellor HFY stood and addressed the council with growing urgency. We must contact the human leadership immediately and negotiate their return. Offer them whatever concessions are necessary. Full voting rights, expanded territory, equal status with founding species, anything they want. General Kremos activated his communication system and attempted to reach Admiral Morrison aboard the Resilience. After several minutes of trying, he looked up with confusion. Chancellor, I cannot establish contact with any human vessels. Their communication systems are no longer compatible with our networks. The truth was that human ships had switched to quantum communication systems that operated on entirely different principles than Empire technology. The humans could monitor Empire communications if they chose to, but the Empire could no longer reach them. Humanity had not simply left the Empire, they had made themselves unreachable. Dr. Foster, aboard the New Horizon, was monitoring these desperate attempts at communication with amusement. The Empire leaders were finally beginning to understand what they had lost, but it was far too late for negotiations. Humanity had spent months preparing for this departure, ensuring that every critical system they maintained would be safely shut down and removed. The aliens were about to discover just how much they had taken for granted. As the colony ships reached the edge of Empire space and prepared to jump to hyperspace toward their new destinations. President Carl Johnson stood in the command center of New Terra, humanity's first major colony beyond the galactic rim. 1 year had passed since the exodus began, and the reports coming from Empire space painted a picture of total collapse. The massive holographic display showed the locations of human colonies scattered across previously unexplored star systems, each one thriving in ways that would have been impossible under Empire restrictions. The communication array crackled too, life with another desperate message from Chancellor Vexthari. President Johnson, I implore you to reconsider humanity's position. The Empire is prepared to offer full membership status, expanded territory rights, and equal representation in all council decisions. We need your people's expertise to address the current crisis. Carl looked at the message timestamp and shook his head. It had taken 6 days for the transmission to reach New Terra through the Empire's failing communication network. He gestured to his aide to delete the message without responding. This was the 14th such plea they had received this month, each more desperate than the last. Dr. Karen Thompson had been monitoring the medical disasters spreading across Empire territory from her new research facility on the colony world of Haven. The data coming through intercepted Empire communications was staggering. A plague was sweeping through the Rigel sector, killing millions of aliens whose immune systems had become dependent on treatments that human physicians had been quietly providing for decades. The disease had started on the mining world of Rigel Prime, where Vorthic workers had been extracting rare minerals for over a century. Dr. Thompson had established medical protocols there 30 years ago to prevent exactly this type of outbreak. The mining operations exposed workers to radiation that gradually weakened their cybernetic immune systems. Her treatments had kept the condition under control by boosting their natural biological defenses while their mechanical components were repaired. Without human medical oversight, the Vorthic workers' immune systems had begun failing simultaneously. The disease spread quickly through their interconnected cybernetic networks, jumping from world to world wherever Vorthic populations existed. The Empire's medical facilities were completely unprepared to treat a condition they had never known. Existed. Karen watched the casualty reports with professional detachment. She had tried for years to train Empire physicians in these procedures, but they had always insisted that such specialized knowledge was unnecessary, since humans would always be available to handle complex cases. Now millions were dying because of that arrogance. On the industrial world of Korath, the situation was even worse. The planet's population of 12 billion beings depended on atmospheric processors that maintained breathable air in their underground cities. The processors had been designed by human engineers to work with the planet's unique atmospheric composition, which was toxic to most species in its natural state. Engineer Rebecca Davis had maintained those systems for 15 years before the Exodus. She had repeatedly warned the planetary government that the processors required regular calibration and component replacement, but the local authorities had always deferred maintenance to save costs. They assumed the systems would run indefinitely without human intervention. Rebecca was now designing atmospheric systems for human colonies, creating environments that were perfectly suited to human needs without requiring the complex compromises necessary in multi-species installations. Meanwhile, the processors on Korath were beginning to fail one by one. The planetary government had sent increasingly frantic messages to human colonies begging for technical assistance, but no response ever came. The military situation was becoming equally desperate for the Empire. The hegemony wars had reignited with a fury that shocked even the most experienced military leaders. The conflict between the Kroger Dominion and the Ethereal Confederacy had been contained for 40 years through careful diplomacy and strategic peacekeeping operations led by human commanders. General Patricia Lee had been the architect of the peace accords that ended the last major phase of the war. Her innovative approach had involved creating joint economic ventures between the two hostile species, giving them shared interests that made war economically disastrous for both sides. She had also established neutral zones patrolled by human peacekeepers who were trusted by both factions. Patricia now commanded the military forces protecting human colonies in the outer spiral, far from the chaos-consuming Empire space. Her scouts reported that the Kroger and Ethereal fleets were engaged in battles of unprecedented destruction. Without human mediators to negotiate ceasefires or establish temporary truces, every minor skirmish escalated into a major engagement. Empire's own military forces were struggling to contain the violence. Their commanders had relied on human tactical expertise for so long that they had forgotten how to develop their own strategies. Battle plans that had worked for decades were failing catastrophically without the innovative modifications that human officers had routinely provided. Captain Steve Martinez aboard the Pioneer was monitoring Empire military communications from his position in the Magellanic Bridge region. The intercepts painted a picture of complete strategic confusion. Empire fleets were using outdated battle formations and predictable maneuvers that made them easy targets for any competent enemy. The most shocking intelligence came from the outer rim territories, where sensors had detected massive fleet movements that could only mean one thing: the Void Hunters, an extragalactic species that had been contained beyond the galactic boundary for over 2 centuries, were massing for what appeared to be a major invasion. Steve immediately transmitted this information to President Johnson. On New Terra, the Void Hunters had been held in check by a combination of Empire military forces and advanced defensive systems, most of which had been designed and maintained by human engineers. With those systems failing and Empire fleets in disarray, the outer defenses were collapsing. The Empire's response to the Void Hunter threat revealed the full extent of their military decline. Admiral Zextar of the Empire Defense Force assembled the largest fleet in galactic history to meet the invasion, but his tactics were centuries out of date. The Empire ships moved in rigid formations, that had been effective against conventional enemies, but were completely unsuited to fighting the highly mobile Void Hunter vessels. The first major engagement near the Terminus Nebula resulted in a devastating defeat for the Empire. Over 300 vessels were destroyed in less than 6 hours, with minimal damage inflicted on the enemy. The Void Hunters employed energy-draining weapons and phase-shifting technology that Empire forces had no effective countermeasures for. What the Empire did not know was that human scouts had been observing Void Hunter movements for months. Captain Martinez and his team had developed preliminary countermeasures for their weapons and tactics. But this information remained locked away in human databases that Empire forces could no longer access, the economic collapse accelerating across Empire territory was perhaps the most visible sign of humanity's importance. Trade routes that had functioned for centuries were completely disrupted. Navigation computers aboard merchant vessels were producing increasingly inaccurate courses as they lost access to the regular updates provided by human-operated monitoring stations. The Galactic Trade Council reported that commerce had dropped by 60% in the past year. Entire star systems were being cut off from interstellar trade as ships became unable to plot safe courses through asteroid fields, gravitational anomalies, and other hazards that human navigators had routinely managed. Food shortages were beginning to appear on worlds that had imported agricultural products from human-operated farms. The hydroponic systems and genetic modification techniques that had allowed humans to grow crops in previously unsuitable environments were far more advanced than anything other species possessed. Without access to human agricultural technology, many worlds faced the prospect of famine. Manufacturing centers across the Empire were operating at less than 30% capacity. The automated systems that controlled production lines had been programmed and maintained by human technicians whose expertise covered everything from basic mechanical systems to advanced artificial intelligence protocols. As these systems failed, without proper maintenance, entire industries ground to a halt. Supreme Chancellor Vexthari convened daily emergency sessions as the crisis deepened. The reports from across Empire territory grew worse with each passing day. Worlds were going dark as power systems failed. Entire populations were being evacuated from planets where life support systems could no longer be maintained. The carefully constructed civilization that had taken millennia to build was collapsing in less than 2 years. How long can this continue? General Kremos asked during one particularly grim briefing. His own cybernetic enhancements were beginning to malfunction as replacement parts became unavailable. Our people are dying while the humans ignore our communications. Chancellor Vexthari studied the latest casualty reports with growing desperation. We must find a way to reach them. Surely, they cannot watch the galaxy burn without feeling some compassion for their former neighbors. General Kremos stood before the emergency assembly of Empire military leaders, his cybernetic implants sparking occasionally as they struggled to function without proper maintenance. 2 years had passed since humanity's departure, and the Empire teetered on the edge of complete military collapse. The Void Hunter invasion was advancing through the Outer Rim territories, destroying everything in their path, while internal conflicts consumed what remained of Empire forces. "We have no choice," Kremos declared, his mechanical voice distorting slightly. "Operation Recall must be implemented immediately. We will locate the human colonies and force them to return. The Empire cannot survive without their expertise." The assembled commanders nodded grimly, though many harbored private doubts about their ability to succeed where diplomacy had failed. The Empire had spent months trying to locate human settlements beyond the galactic rim. Their scouts had found evidence of human presence in dozens of star systems, but the colonies themselves remained elusive. Human ships seemed to appear and disappear at will, using technology that Empire sensors could not track effectively. "Admiral, Helen Rodriguez commanded the human defense fleet from her flagship Liberty, a vessel that would have seemed impossible to Empire engineers just years earlier. The ship could phase shift through dimensional barriers, making it effectively invisible to conventional sensors. Her weapons could manipulate gravitational fields to tear enemy vessels apart, and her shields converted incoming energy attacks into power for her own systems. Helen watched the Empire fleet movements through her advanced monitoring systems with professional interest. Intelligence reports indicated that the Empire was preparing their largest military operation in centuries, with over 2,000 vessels being assembled for what they were calling Operation Recall. She found their confidence amusing, given that they had no idea what they would actually be facing. The first Empire task force to locate a human colony targeted the agricultural world of New Eden in the Kepler Nebula. The planet supported over 2 million human colonists and had become a major food production center for the growing human civilization. Admiral Zixstar led the assault with 300 of the Empire's most advanced warships, expecting to overwhelm the lightly defended human settlement. What they found instead was a defensive network that defied everything they thought they knew about military technology. Colonel Derek Thompson commanded the ground defenses, wearing powered armor that made him virtually invulnerable to Empire weapons. The armor could deflect energy blasts, absorb kinetic impacts, and even phase through solid matter when necessary. The Empire forces opened fire on what appeared to be a small defensive station orbiting New Eden. Their weapons struck the target with enough force to destroy a moon, but the energy simply vanished into the station's shields without causing any visible damage. Moments later, the station returned fire with weapons that seemed to bend space itself, creating gravitational anomalies that crushed Empire ships like insects. Pilot Maria Santos led the human fighter squadrons in a counterattack that stunned the Empire commanders. Her fighters moved through space in ways that violated every known law of physics, appearing in multiple locations simultaneously and passing through Empire vessels as if they were made of empty space. The Empire fighters found themselves unable to target enemies that seemed to exist in several dimensions at once. The battle for New Eden lasted less than 3 hours. When it ended, over 200 Empire vessels had been destroyed or disabled, while human forces suffered no casualties at all. The surviving Empire ships retreated in confusion, their commanders struggling to understand how such a devastating defeat was possible. Admiral Zexstar's report to the Empire High Command sent shockwaves through the remaining leadership. The humans possess technology that appears to be centuries ahead of our own capabilities. Their weapons and defenses operate on principles that our scientists cannot even begin to understand. Operation Ragal has failed before it truly began. But the most shocking revelation was yet to come. Ambassador Robert Kim had been conducting secret negotiations with the Void Hunters for months, operating from a hidden diplomatic station in the space between galaxies. The beings that the Empire considered their greatest external threat had actually approached humanity, seeking alliance and mutual assistance. The truth about the Void Hunters was far different from what the Empire believed. They were not invaders, seeking to conquer and destroy, but refugees fleeing from something far worse. Their home galaxy had been consumed by entities they called the Devourers, beings of pure energy that fed on matter and consciousness itself. The Void Hunters had been searching for allies who might help them find a way to fight back against this ultimate threat. Robert discovered that the Void Hunters had been trying to warn the Empire about the Devourers for decades, but their attempts at communication had been interpreted as hostile threats. The Empire's aggressive response had forced the Void Hunters to defend themselves, creating a cycle of conflict that had lasted for centuries. The Void Hunters were fascinated by human adaptability and problem-solving abilities. Unlike the rigid thinking patterns of most galactic species, humans could approach problems from multiple angles and develop innovative solutions under pressure. This flexibility was exactly what the Void Hunters needed in their desperate struggle. Against the DEVOURERS. Dr. Michelle Adams led the joint research team that was established following the Alliance Agreement. Working with Void Hunter scientists, she gained access to technologies that put humanity centuries ahead of anything the Empire possessed. Matter conversion systems that could transform basic elements into any desired material, temporal manipulation. Devices that allowed limited control over time itself, and consciousness transfer protocols that could back up and restore entire minds. The collaboration produced breakthrough after breakthrough. Human creativity combined with Void Hunter knowledge created solutions to problems that had seemed impossible. Planetary terraforming that could transform dead worlds into garden paradises in months rather than centuries. Energy generation systems that tap directly into the quantum vacuum, and defensive technologies that could protect entire star systems from any conceivable attack. Meanwhile, the Empire continued to disintegrate under the pressure of multiple crises. The hegemony wars had spread to involve over 40 different species, turning vast regions of space into battlefields where entire civilizations were being exterminated. The Kroger Dominion had developed new weapons of mass destruction that could sterilize planets in minutes, while the Ethereal Confederacy responded with biological warfare that turned enemy populations into mindless drones. The plague that had started in the Rigel sector continued to spread unchecked. Empire medical facilities were completely overwhelmed, and the death toll had reached into the billions. Entire species faced extinction as diseases that had been controlled for generations returned with unprecedented virulence. Economic collapse had reached the point where basic necessities were becoming unavailable on many worlds. Transportation networks had broken down so completely that some star systems had been cut off from all outside contact for months. Governments were falling as populations lost faith in their leaders' ability to address the mounting crises. Chancellor Vexthari had been removed from office in a military coup led by General Krymos, who promised to restore order through the use of force. But even the Empire's most aggressive military leaders were beginning to realize that their problems could not be solved through violence. They needed expertise that no longer existed within their borders. The final blow came when long-range sensors detected the approach of Devourer scouts at the edge of the galaxy. The entities that had destroyed the Void Hunter's home were now moving toward the Milky Way, drawn by the massive amounts of energy being released by the ongoing conflicts. The Empire's wars had created a beacon that would guide the ultimate predators directly to their location. President Johnson received this intelligence at his headquarters on New Terra with grim satisfaction. The Empire that had dismissed humanity as a junior species now faced threats that would require every resource they could muster just to survive. But those resources were no longer available to them, having departed along with the humans they had treated with such contempt. The irony was not lost on human leaders. The Empire's arrogance and prejudice had created the very situation that would destroy them. By driving away their most capable problem solvers at the moment when the greatest problems in galactic history were about to arrive, they had sealed their own fate. Human colonies continued to expand and prosper in the regions beyond the galactic rim. New technologies developed through the alliance with the Void Hunters allowed them to establish settlements in star systems that would have been impossible to reach using Empire technology. Trade networks connected human worlds across vast distances, creating a new civilization that was already surpassing what the Empire had achieved in millennia of existence. The contrast between human success and Empire failure was becoming impossible to ignore. While the Empire descended into chaos and destruction, humanity was building something entirely new. President Carl Johnson stood in the crystal halls of New Geneva City, looking out at the most unusual diplomatic gathering in galactic history. 3 years had passed since humanity left the Empire, and now representatives from that dying civilization sat before him like beggars, asking for mercy. The irony was perfect and painful. The Empire delegation was led by what remained of their government after the military coup and subsequent civil wars. General Kremos, his cybernetic parts failing visibly, sat beside Chancellor Pro Tem Vixenal, a Zephyrin whose crystal body showed stress fractures from months of crisis management. Behind them sat the desperate leaders of dozens of species, each one facing extinction in their own unique way. The meeting hall itself was a testament to how far humanity had advanced. Built using technology shared by the Void Hunters, the building existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, its walls appearing as solid crystal to some species, while remaining transparent energy fields to others. The architecture defied every known law of physics, yet felt perfectly natural to human occupants who had learned to think beyond the limitations that trapped other species. Admiral Morrison, now serving as humanity's chief diplomatic officer, presented the intelligence reports that had brought this meeting about. The holographic displays showed the approaching Devourer fleet in terrifying detail. Massive entities of pure energy, each one larger than a star system, moving through space. By consuming everything in their path, they had already destroyed 17 galaxies, and their arrival in the Milky Way was less than 6 months away. The advanced scouts reached the outer rim 3 days ago, Morrison explained, his voice calm despite the magnitude of the threat. Our sensors indicate that the main force consists of over 10,000 Devourer entities, each capable of consuming an entire star system in a matter of hours. They feed on matter, energy, and consciousness itself, leaving nothing but empty space behind. General Kremos leaned forward, his failing implants sparking. Admiral Morrison, surely humanity cannot stand against such a threat alone. We must combine our forces and face this enemy together. His voice carried a note of desperation that would have been unthinkable during the days of Empire dominance. Carl smiled coldly. General, where was this spirit of cooperation when humanity requested? Equal representation in the Council? Where was it when we were denied basic rights despite our contributions to galactic civilization? He gestured to the displays showing the current state of Empire territory. You spent 2 centuries treating us as servants, and now you expect. Used to die protecting masters who never respected us. The Thargonian delegate, Ambassador Velther, stood on his multiple root legs. President Johnson, surely you do not intend to let billions of innocent beings die because of the mistakes of our leaders. His bark-like skin showed the gray patches that indicated severe stress in his species. Dr. Michelle Adams, now serving as humanity's Minister of Science, activated a new set of displays showing the technological capabilities available to the Human Void Hunter Alliance. The question is not whether we can defeat the Devourers, but whether the Empire is worth saving. Her words struck the alien delegates like physical blows. The displays showed weapons that could manipulate matter at the quantum level, defensive systems that existed outside normal spacetime, and construction projects that defied imagination. The Unity Station, a joint human Void Hunter megastructure, was larger than most moons and contained enough firepower to destroy entire star fleets. Terraforming ships that could transform dead worlds into garden paradises in days rather than years. Mobile cities that could phase between dimensions to avoid any attack. Chancellor Pro Tem Vixnal's crystal form chimed with harmonics that indicated extreme distress. We understand that the Empire has made grave errors in its treatment of humanity. We are prepared to offer complete equality in all matters, shared governance of all territories, and full access to all Empire resources and technology. Carl laughed, a sound that made several aliens flinch. Chancellor, what territories? What resources? Your empire is collapsing. Half your worlds are uninhabitable due to system failures. Your military has been destroyed in pointless wars. Your economy has ceased to function. You offer us partnership in a corpse. Admiral Helen Rodriguez, commanding the Human Defense Forces, presented the military assessment. Our intelligence indicates that Empire forces could delay the Devourers for perhaps 3 days if they coordinate perfectly and sacrifice everything they have. Even with our assistance, victory is not guaranteed. The question becomes whether humanity wishes to risk its survival for species that have shown us nothing but contempt. The room fell silent as the weight of the situation settled on the alien delegates. They had come hoping to negotiate from a position of some remaining strength, but the humans had made it clear that the Empire had nothing left to offer except the moral obligation to save lives. Ambassador Robert Kim, who had negotiated the alliance with the Void Hunters, spoke for the first time during the meeting. There is one possibility that changes the calculation entirely. He activated a new display showing the Deep Space Array, a massive sensor network that humanity and the Void Hunters had constructed beyond the galactic rim. Our long-range scans have detected something the Devourers do not know about, Robert continued. Behind them, approximately 50 years distant, comes something that makes them appear insignificant by comparison. The Void Hunters call them the Silence, entities that exist to eliminate all forms of consciousness from the universe. The Devourers are not predators. They are refugees fleeing from something far worse. The implications hit the alien delegates like a physical force. Not only were they facing immediate extinction from the Devourers, but even if they somehow survived, an even greater threat was approaching. General Kremos' cybernetic systems finally failed completely, leaving him partially paralyzed in his chair. Carl stood and walked to the great windows overlooking New Geneva City. Below, humans and Void Hunters worked together on projects that would have seemed like magic to the Empire just years earlier. Children of both species played in parks that existed in folded space, giving them access to areas larger than planets, while remaining within the city limits. The choice before us is simple, Carl said without turning around. We can allow the Devourers to consume the Empire territories, buying ourselves time to prepare for the silence. Or we can risk everything in a desperate attempt to save civilizations that have proven incapable of saving themselves. Dr. Adams pulled up the final display, showing the battle plan that had been developed by human and Void Hunter strategists. Working together. If we choose to fight, it will require the complete dissolution of the Empire and the creation of a new democratic galactic alliance. Every species must contribute equally, accept human leadership in military matters, and submit to the technological integration necessary for our weapons to function effectively. The terms were not negotiable. Humanity had learned from the Empire's mistakes and would not repeat them. Any alliance would be built on genuine equality and mutual respect, not the hierarchy and discrimination that had characterized galactic civilization for millennia. Ambassador Velther spoke for the assembled delegates. We accept your terms completely, and without reservation. Our species will dissolve the Empire and join your democratic galactic alliance as equal partners under human military leadership. Carl finally turned back to face the delegates. Very well. Admiral Morrison will oversee the transition process. All Empire military forces will be integrated into our command structure immediately. All technological resources will be shared equally among alliance members, and all species will contribute to the construction of the defense grid that represents our only hope of survival. The next months passed in frantic preparation. The Unity Battle Station, a massive joint construction project, became the symbol of the new alliance. Built using the combined knowledge of dozens of species under human coordination, it represented the pinnacle of galactic technological achievement. Admiral Ryan Brooks commanded the station, now promoted to serve as Supreme Allied Commander. The Devourers finally arrived at the edge of the galaxy. They faced not the divided and weakening empire they had expected, but a united democratic galactic alliance, armed with weapons that operated on principles beyond their understanding. The first battle was fought near the Terminus Nebula, where human-designed gravity manipulators created artificial black holes that consumed entire Devourer entities. The war that followed would last for decades and cost billions of lives. But for the first time in galactic history, every species fought as true equals under a banner of genuine cooperation. The empire that had dismissed humanity as a junior species was gone forever, replaced by something far greater than the sum of its parts. And when the Silence finally arrived 50 years later, they would find not a collection of primitive civilizations, ripe for elimination, but a unified galactic democracy that had learned to harness the power of true cooperation under the leadership of the species that had once been considered least among them. Humanity had left the galactic empire in disgust, but they had returned as the saviors of the universe itself.